different ways to like stay connected throughout the day or when we travel.
Has anybody ever had an online dating conversation that only gifts? Only gifts. Okay, is that okay. Any other positives that were different than what were listed? Okay, I know it's like pulling teeth with positives. So with the negatives, here's what we've heard. We've heard that it makes people less accountable. So that's where the ghosting and breadcrumbing, and also just you text for 3 days and you never hear from them again because you're not a real person until they meet you in real life. And there's also this paradox of choice. You have too many choices. It gets to a point where you're like, I don't actually know what I want anymore. There's also this idea of it's too easy. You know, people think, I have nothing to do Friday night. I'll just swipe on the apps. I'll fill up my calendar. I had a girlfriend in New York that went on 5 dates a week. Has anybody gone on more than 5 dates a week? With 5 different people. Okay, how many?
Probably 6 or 7.
6 or 7? Okay, can you go up? Yes? Just 6. Just 6, guys. Not a big deal. Just 6. And after the 6th date, you probably get them all mixed up. Right?
That's why you have nicknames.
That's like an Excel spreadsheet, too. We did an episode called The Man Funnel. Okay? And it was one of the most popular episodes because it's about keeping men in the funnel until one is ready to commit to you. There are many tactics of doing that. You can look that up. Some other negatives we've heard are people become too flaky. It goes with the ghosting as well. But people have been stood up on dates. People just feel like they can do anything they want because they don't actually feel like they're dealing with a human being. They're dealing with an app. They're dealing with an avatar of sorts. Any other negatives we've heard that are a little different? Yes?
Technology can be really distracting, so you're not present when you're actually interacting.
Absolutely. How many of you have been on dates where the other person leaves the phone face up and it just keeps buzzing? How does that make you feel? Awful. Anxious. Right?
Yeah.
How many of you have done that on dates, though? Yes. Exactly. Any other negatives? Yes.
There's that like whole concept of like orbiting where like after you do things with someone, they're still like all over your social media and they're just like still in your life in like a really negative way. Which it would have been like that before, like 20 years ago.
I like that term.
That's a really great term because one thing we've learned with online dating is that you have no idea what their situation is. You don't know if they're dating 5 other people. You don't know if they're getting into a relationship, out of a relationship. You don't know if they're halfway in a relationship or in a triad relationship, right? You have no idea. You have no idea where they are in their journey. All you have is their social media if you're really good at stalking. I am. Julie, my producer for DATEABLE, taught me that you can stalk people on Venmo. It's a really good way to stalk people. Who have they been Venmoing last? Who did they go to the wedding with last? Yes? So we're getting information actually not from the actual person. We're getting information from their online persona. Any other negatives? I'm sure there's 1,000 more.
Sort of anonymity. People think that they can say whatever they want to somebody. Like the cold open on online dating is always, well, not always, 85% disgusting. Like, people will say things to you that they would never say to a human person in a bar. They would never walk up to a woman and say something so incredibly insulting and nasty and expect you to be okay with it. But they can do that because you can't see them. You know, that anonymity gives them this horrible freedom they should never have.
And guess what? Women do the same thing. Unfortunately. We hear from both sides of the coin. We hear men complaining that women would reach out to them right away and ask them about their job situation. Ask them if they've been divorced before. Ask them how much money they make. Or ask them if they are even ready for a relationship. As an opener. So we are all to blame for some of the consequences we see in online dating. Let's do one more.
Now, this might be a pro for some people, but we all, I think, we're collectively agree on unsolicited pictures that you receive.
Okay.
So So, Ines, you should be really happy that you got a fish photo.
I know about the other ones.
Oh, do you? Do you? I'd like to see what that would look like. The unsolicited photos, again, goes to what you were saying, anonymity. Apparently, if I just show you my junk, it's okay. But at a bar, I would never do that because you see my face. You don't want to attach my junk to my face, no. And somehow, if I show you my junk, I think you're going to get really turned on by it. Yeah, because that's what my friend told me, Joe. Because he keeps sending girls his junk, and at least one bites. Yeah, anonymity. So what can we do with this technology thing that we're dealing with? We can't blame technology. Hey, we live in San Francisco. We live in the epicenter of tech. The wing is basically surrounded by tech. Most of you probably work in tech. We can't avoid the technology. So something we've learned on our podcast is it's not external factors we can control. We actually can't control how many douchebags are out there, although we can complain about it. We can't control how many times we get breadcrumbed or ghosted or stashed. We have nothing to control external factors. The only thing we can control is our internal factors, how we digest this information. So one of the things I love to do is this idea of like managing your thoughts, right? And Ines can speak to this too. Throughout the years, what changes isn't so much your external factors. You may look a little different, you may think a little differently, but it's how you process information. When someone ghosts you, how do you process that information? That's what you have control over. You can either say, F this dude, everyone's a douchebag, I'm getting off the apps, I'm taking a dating sabbatical. Or you can do what Ines did, and threw a ghosting party, basically. Right? We can't control what other people do, but what we hear on the podcast is that we're all to blame. We've all done these things, whether intentional or non-intentional. You actually have no idea where someone else is in their journey. You have no idea what they're going through, so you can't actually control their actions. You can only control yours. So when you change the way you process your thoughts, it creates different reactions, and that's the external change. That's what your friends see. That's what your family sees. Oh, she seems different these days. She seems softer. She seems more optimistic. It's not so much that you woke up one day and was like, I'm going to be an optimistic girl today. No, it's your way of processing that funneling of the actions into how you want to deal with them in your mind. We are all experiencing this together. Know that you're not alone in this. No. Even your age, your gender, where you come from, where you live, we hear the same complaints over and over again, whether you live in San Francisco or Denver or New York. It doesn't matter. We've also heard San Francisco is not a good place to date. We go to Milwaukee, they say the same thing. It's the same everywhere. You can't control your external factors. You can only control how you process these external factors. Your mindset is the only thing you have control over. Let's move on to the next discussion, because I love this. The next discussion is, think back to when you first started dating, whether you were 12 or 30. What is some advice you would tell your younger self? Okay, let's do 5 minutes on that. Everyone just think about one piece of advice you would tell your younger self. The advice you give your younger self, whether that was yesterday or 10 years ago. Where's Alex? Alex was sitting next to me. Where did you go? Where'd she go? Did she sneak out? We remember this question was pretty much this similar question we had in the beginning, and she said, I would tell my younger self to listen to my gut more. I'm pretty sure a lot of you had that. And mine would be stop doing selective listening, because a lot of times we go on dates and we only want to listen to the good stuff. And all the red flags, and all the quirkiness, and the bad quirkiness. So you just like, forget about it. Like, it just comes out. Like, I didn't hear that. And later you're like, oh, right. Should have listened. So let's go around the room. Some advice you would give your younger self. You can either say the one that you told everyone, or maybe some advice you heard in your group that you really liked. Anybody? Yes.
I would tell my younger self to date more. I think that, so I'm married and divorced, and I wish that I would have dated a lot more when I was younger, and like sampled around a little more so that I knew what kind of commitment I was actually making. And I also think that like dating now can be a lot more lighthearted than like some people put energy into, and like you can go out and have a fun date and have some like have a good conversation, and like maybe that's it. And like you can communicate that and say like thanks for the evening, that was fun, and go on your way, and it doesn't need to be so serious. But it's like getting yourself out and meeting more different, like more personality types, I think has been really awesome experience for me to see like how many great options there are, like, and putting a positive spin on it.
That's a very good point. It's so interesting because some of us are in the trenches of dating, and you think about so many dates, and a lot of them go nowhere, and I'm just dating fatigued. And my mom said to me the other day, she's like, "You're so lucky. Your dad helped me with my homework," and I was like, "He's it." And she didn't know anything better. She thought there were other cute guys, but she's only been with him her whole life. So at some point, you're like, maybe choice isn't such a bad thing. Any other advice? Yes.
What I've learned for the last 2 years is when people show you who they are, believe them. Believe them the first time around, because I am the type of person where I look at you and I see good, no matter how you do me dirty, and I accept you. And I look past the dirtiness, and you do me dirty again, and I'm like, okay, and then I look past it again. But you do me dirty one last time, and I'm done. So I have to be able to look at you, and when you do me dirty the first time, I just have to walk away and say, it's not worth it. And so that is what I have learned, and that is it.
That is incredible advice, because the action has to match the words as well. How many of us have been on dates where we're like, said all the right things, but a few months go by and none of the action matches the words, and you're like, who is this person really? Do I really know this person? I know people who've been married for years and had no idea who they were married to, because all they were listening were the sweet words, but didn't see if the action matched the words. Any other words of advice? Yes.
I was raised in a very traditional family environment where I was supposed to go to college and get married, make babies, and then maybe have a career, and none of that happened other than the career, finally. So my advice to my younger self, and to all younger women too, is to take charge of your finances. And there's one book that I absolutely love. It's called Prince Charming Isn't Coming. And I highly recommend it to every woman. But for me, it's I really wish, for many reasons, that I had taken charge of my finances in my career more when I was younger.
Fantastic. You gotta be the purse and the nurse for yourself. You can't look for it in other people. You gotta nurse and purse yourself. Any other piece of advice? Let's do one more. One more, yes.
We talked about the value of over communicating and how that needs to happen twofold. One, you need to convince yourself that expressing your point of view is valuable, but also if you're not in an environment where you feel like you're allowed to do that, then it's probably not the right environment. So if you don't have healthy communication, it's probably not right for one of those reasons.
Absolutely. Communication seems like to be one of those buzzwords that's almost as buzzworthy as like scalable. Service is scalable. Do you have good communication? It's like the same level. So when we talk about communication, it's actually a kind of a daily exercise. If you exercise physically on a regular basis. We have to exercise communication on a regular basis. I didn't find this out until I went to couples therapy with my ex, where I discovered he wasn't the right one for me, which is great. Couples therapy isn't just for mending a relationship, but also for you to clarify your relationship. But from that, I learned that this idea of communication, it's a daily battle. You have to work on it every day, within yourself and with others as well. So just saying communication is a great starting point, but we also have to know that we have to keep working on it on a daily basis as a daily mantra. So some of the advice that we've heard on our podcast from other generations to their younger selves are, one is you have to go through the trenches. We live in a world where we think there's hacks and shortcuts, right? We live in San Francisco where we have hackathons. We're trying to find ways to hack life, shortcut everything. But when it comes to love, there are no shortcuts. So you have to go through the trenches. What I mean by that is, we had 2 guests on our show the other day. Been friends for 8 years. It took them 8 years to get together and become a couple. And their friends would say, why did it take you 8 years? You could have done this 8 years ago. And the guy said, I had to go through what I went through to come to love her. I had to go through the trenches. There were no shortcuts. He went through breakups, heartaches. He went through problems of his own. He went through therapy to get to the love that he's been looking for, although it's been in front of him his whole life, basically. So we have to go through the trenches. Whatever you're going through right now, whatever you're scared of, or whatever makes you uncomfortable, go through it. Because you have to. There's no other way around it. If you try to find another way, it will veer you back. It always happens that way. And when it comes to talking about going through trenches as well, you have to think about not being afraid. I think when we talk about dating in this world, everyone's so afraid of having that DTR, right? As women especially, we're so afraid to be the first ones to have that conversation. I don't know if I should be the most eager one in this to bring this up. But what we found on our podcast is, if you want to be in a relationship, go for it. Stop thinking about the consequences. It actually makes sense to be in more relationships in your lifetime than not, because that's where you learn. That's where the real work happens. We can talk about personal development and communication skills all we want, but without someone else working on that with you, you actually don't learn as much. So for those of you who maybe are afraid of getting into relationships or afraid of bringing up that conversation, do it. And the right person who's going through the trenches, who's in the trenches with you, will say, hell yeah, let's do this. The other thing we learned was asking for feedback. So our first episode of our podcast was a listener, agreed for us to contact 5 of the previous girls he went on dates with that didn't go anywhere. And we recorded the entire conversation. And it is mind-boggling. So, just one example. He went on a date with a girl, and from the girl's perspective, he was not into it. They were 1 drink in, and he ran for the bus. Literally, he was like, I'm sorry, my bus is here. And she was like, I'm never going to hear from this guy again, because apparently I was so boring that he left and ran for the bus. From his perspective, he said, she didn't show me any of the signs that she was into me. Her knees were turned outward. She didn't touch me. She didn't make eye contact with me. I just assumed she wasn't interested. So I ran before she could reject me. Fascinating, right? So when we ask for feedback, that's when we get on the same page. If you don't ask for feedback, all we're doing, we're so self-referential. Everything's about us. How does he think about me? What does she think about me? How does this world think about me? Do you know, nobody's thinking about you. Because on these dates, everyone's so much thinking about themselves. Am I coming off funny? Am I interesting? Am I too boring? Am I talking about myself too much? Nobody's thinking about you. So when we think about feedback in the middle of the date, it actually makes sense to say, hey, are you having a good time? Do you want to get another drink? Do you think we would see each other again? Is that scary? Kind of. But it's gonna save you a lot of time later and heartache. You guys have to listen to this episode because he went on 5 dates with 5 girls who all thought he wasn't interested, and he would have gone on a second date with all of them. Think about different perspectives. So one thing we really have learned on the podcast is you learn so much more about yourself from listening to perspectives that you can't relate to. So we've done shows about a dominatrix, we've had polyamory, open relationships, we've had triad couples, we had a unicorn on. Do you know what a unicorn is? Ines? You know what a unicorn is? Unicorn is like a third in a relationship who basically the couple takes in as a pet, but in sexual and non-sexual ways. And we also had a guy who had a diaper fetish, okay? So in some ways, Julie and I we're so, sometimes I'm so bored because I'm like, a diaper fetish? This guy's gonna be so weird. He came on our show so normal in my mind. And he sounded hot. We never saw his face. He was anonymous. We were like, damn, he sounds hot. And all he wanted was his fiance to put in a diaper every once in a while and walk around the house and do house stuff. Like do the dishes or cook or just sit there and watch TV. That's all he wanted. And Julie and I, after this episode, we were like, oh my God, if the perfect man came into my life and everything was fine, and all he wanted was for me to put on some motherfucking diapers, I will do it. I will do it. Because you know, diapers are really comfortable. They're better than lingerie. So, different perspectives. Different perspectives. I don't subscribe to a different kind of lifestyle, but I learned so much more from that. We had a polyamorous couple on. I'm like, I can't share my man with someone else. I can't even get one man locked down. I can't think of multiples. But learning from them is like, oh my God, all they do is communicate all day. So much communication, so much coordinating. They share one Google Calendar with each other, another one with their third, and then their fourth, and their second tier, and their hierarchy, I don't even know. But there's so much coordinating and communication that you can really learn a lot from them. Different perspectives. Different perspectives. Same thing goes for your careers. If you work in tech, go interview a guy who runs a restaurant. That's a guy who knows how to survive, right? So same with our love lives. If you're trying to, and he'll cook for you, exactly, and hopefully not send you dick pics. But if you are in the trenches of your journey in love, and you're just trying to figure things out in your life, then go ask someone else who lives a totally different life of how they're making it work. Because that's how you learn. And the very last thing I'll say is this is what we've been learning from everyone. As you get older and as you progress in life, you think about your personal brand. And that sounds so corporate to say, but what is it you're bringing to the table? When you go on dates, who are you? Who are you? What are your core values? What do you stand for? If you were a cereal at Trader Joe's, what would it say on your box? And as we grow, we start to throw more into our personal brand. And how do we keep that personal brand? And how do we take it to everything we do? And that bleeds into our love lives. When someone sees that you know yourself so well, and they subscribe to your personal brand, that's when you know you found someone who's in it with you. We're not here, because we always hear this on our podcast, I'm just trying to get this person to like me back. That's not how love works. We're just being ourselves, and we're just finding someone else who wants to subscribe to what we stand for. And then we create lives together. We're not here trying to convince someone else of anything here. You are who you are, right? And if you have to convince someone to like you, that's not the right person, because they can always be convinced by someone else too. So, what did we learn from this whole entire discussion? I think the only thing we have control over, again, is our thoughts, our mind, our mindset, how we process things, but also how we treat other people. And we keep hearing this over and over again with technology. We don't treat each other like human beings. We're also at fault. So how do we change that And going forward, how do we subscribe to this personal brand of treating each other like human beings? How do we get back in the day when you meet people at the airport? I've never met anybody at the airport. The airport is fabulous. Not for me, because I have my earbuds in, my head's down, and I have RBF, right? So how do we get back to the human factor? And that's what's really going to help with our love lives. So for this last 30 seconds, if we could all, we're going to do like a little meditation exercise here, not to get all kumbaya, but the question you should ask yourself for this last 30 seconds, and think about the answer. You can even jot it down if you want. But this is not a verbal part. This is all internal. Think about, what would your future self tell yourself today? What would be, what's that?
You're still alive.
You're still alive. Your boobs still look good. What would your future self tell yourself now about whatever situation you're struggling with? Because I know we're all in some sort of situation. Everyone's always in some kind of situation. What would your future self, what advice would that person give you now? Let's take 30 seconds, just close your eyes, think about that, marinate on that. Everyone. So they say hindsight is 20/20, but we don't need to be in the future to look back and say you should have done this differently. All we have to do is just project the future. That's it. And that's what I love about what Charlotte's doing with Cirkel, is that it's about thinking about, you know, the different stages of who you are and how you change throughout those stages. But you don't actually have to teleport into those times. You just have to think about how you want to be in the future and how you can learn from the past. We're going to wrap this up, but we're looking for guests for the DATEABLE podcast. We're always looking for funny stories. Obviously, we have really good funny stories. But if you have something you want to share, if you've gone through something that you really think would benefit other people who are maybe dating fatigued or going through something in their love life, definitely come up to me and Julie after. We'd love to book you as a guest on our show. And if you don't want to be a guest on our show, just listen to the episodes. We have so many good episodes coming up. Tomorrow we have an episode about a guy who has a PSA for all women. Okay, came on our show and was like, I will tell you the truth about men. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. We'll be around afterwards to talk to you all. But thank you again, and thank you, Charlotte, for being here.